So we want to talk about the essential things we learned in the pilot scheme, and I've split this up into two parts because I want to talk about the support aspect and the more holistic aspect of things afterwards. And for now, I want to talk this part about what we learned in terms of making things work, in terms of the building, the property, the area, making sure that we'd protected risk and making sure that we were mitigating the risk as much as possible, and how we can look to replicating these types of projects maybe again and again. So one of the most important things we learned on the pilot scheme was you have to, when you're in your planning stage, take a huge amount of care to make sure that the need is there. So you might have a great idea for a social property investment project, and I've seen this done with landlords before who have gone into it like a bull in a china shop almost, and they've not done their due diligence in the first place and looked at whether that solution is actually required for an area. So we've had, I know of numerous councils in the past that have said, we're just not interested in working in this way. We've got numerous housing projects and different pots of money that we've put into things, and we think we're pretty confident that we have got solutions to homelessness, and we're, whilst we can't stop you doing these types of projects and setting them up, we don't have the need and we're not really needing to engage with them. So I have seen that happen before. So one of the first things you need to do is really make sure that the need is actually there. And you can do this by marketplace testing, where you can go along to the local council, you can send them an introductory email, and you can kind of scope out the marketplace. Start having a look at the charitable sector, have a look at it on social media, see where the need is. And I talk about this at a later stage, but a good rule of thumb in terms of location for social property investment projects: to start your investigations off, have a look at the maps of the job centres and see where the job centres are situated, because they're there to serve the local community, and so there generally is a higher population of welfare claimants in those types of areas. So when we're looking at an area, we want to look at, we're not going to look at anything hugely different to when we're looking on a normal buy-to-let project. We're going to use the same due diligence process as we would do normally. However, we're looking at things on a cash flow basis with social property investment. So we're looking to maximise the cash flow as much as possible, and that's really going to be primarily where we look to make the returns out of this project, is by the rental income that's coming month on month. We may see some capital appreciation there, but obviously when we're looking at a cash flow, predominantly a cash flow strategy, we need to make sure that the cash flow is going to be there. So you need to look at looking into properties and looking at the correlation between typical rental prices and also local housing allowance rates. So you may find a project which you think is perfect for social property investment and it ticks all of the boxes, but it's going to be the local housing allowance is going to be a little bit low, and your tenants are going to need to pay a 20 quid a week top up to make the figures work. It's not going to work. You need to be confident that your returns are stacking up and your figures are stacking up, and you need to be totally fanatical about this before you purchase that property. So, and that needs to be, as I say, it needs to be looking at the cash flow predominantly. You can't be looking at, that needs to be looking at the rental returns predominantly, and you need to be very careful in terms of your costs that are coming off. So if you've got, say, a 4 or 5 bedroom HMO, you may find that the cost, typically, just as a rule of thumb, you may incur costs which are typical to one of those rooms' rent. So that may seem high if you're used to working on vanilla buy-to-let, which the costs are a lot lower. But when you're working in multi-let strategies, and when you're working with multiple tenants and multiple occupants, and social property investment is all about the social aspect of the strategy and creating community living environments. So when you're doing that, there are obviously lots of different costs that you may incur, such as licensing for a start, and planning and building control, and you may need to do a refurbishment. So you need to make sure that your figures totally stack up and you're really confident that the rent that you are setting on that property is going to be achieved via the local housing allowance rates, but B, it's also going to be a solution which is needed by the marketplace. So if there are no tenants to come and live in the property, it's not going to work out long term and you're going to make a loss. And even if you make a loss even if your property sits empty for 3-4 months, that could be catastrophic to your cash flow. If you're paying a mortgage, or with social property investment, you're unlikely paying a mortgage, but you may have some kind of bridging finance, or you may have taken a JV partner, you may be due to pay them back. So it's imperative that you get your figures right, but also you understand the marketplace that you're going into. You understand the types of areas which are going to work for social property investment. Now, I'm going to give you an example, and I work in Manchester. I'm a Manchester girl. So Manchester, for HMO properties and for social property investment, on the surface of it could be a no-go, because if you're an HMO landlord already, you'll be familiar with the fact that it's an Article 4 area in Manchester, and that means we can't have any new HMOs constructed in Manchester. There has been a cap put on that because we have enough already. We have a lot of student accommodation there, and so there is no more allowance for new HMOs to be built there. That doesn't mean, however, that you can't work in Manchester at all. And Greater Manchester is a big place, and it's a fantastic place to invest in social property investment projects. The figures stack up fantastically well, and there's lots of market demand. Manchester is experiencing the worst homelessness it's seen in recent years. Figures have gone through the roof, and we're really struggling on solutions. So there is a huge potential marketplace out there that need this solution, and they need it bringing to them as soon as possible. So if you're close to Manchester, or if you have connections, or if you want me to connect you with anybody in Manchester so that you're able to work within this marketplace, I would really, really, really recommend coming into Manchester, Greater Manchester, as a place to invest in these types of projects. So we've got lots of different towns, and one of the great things about Manchester is we've got the Metrolink, which is the tram line, and over the last few years it's been extended out all over Greater Manchester, and now the transport links into the city are fantastic. And so Manchester really is a hotspot for investment at the moment, and as I say, the figures stack up very, very well in Manchester, and you've seen some examples going over the slides here as I've been talking, and you can see in whichever way you get involved into social property investment, whether that be you invest yourself as a cash investor, you do a JV, you get into a partnership with another agency, however you look at utilising the strengths, talents and resources of the sectors, these projects make sense, and they make sense financially, they make sense socially, they make sense across the board. They have lots and lots of beneficiaries, and so it really is, for me, a really, really viable solution to ending homelessness, and at the very least making a great reduction on homelessness in the UK today. So, as I say, our pilot scheme really taught us about being a little bit fanatical about things, and preparation and prevention and due diligence, and making sure that everything stacks up in terms of the investment opportunity. And as I say, social property investment is it's an enhanced version of a typical buy-to-let strategy. So you can look at how you would normally operate in the buy-to-let marketplace, and then add on with these other enhancements of things like creating a consortium, or implementing strategies that may reduce risk, or looking to increase profits, maybe by completing refurbishments and splitting down units. So looking at looking at a building as a whole and saying, how can we create the best and most profitable solution here, or most cost-effective solution here, but how can we make it amazing inside, and how can we create lots of value for the occupants too. So next we're going to move on and talk about more pilot scheme learnings, where we're going to look more about strategies, systems and support, and how working with partner agencies and implementing some guidance for your tenants, and some getting them in some specialists to assist them with their social issues, and how that can really help you to move forward in a really effective manner, and make sure that the investment that you have put everything into is going to be a real asset for your portfolio, and it's not going to be a liability. So stay with us for the next part, which is more of our pilot scheme findings.